And I must say what an interesting read it was indeed, as it was for the very first time I would have heard and had an opportunity to look at the book. And I would have been tempted to assume that if I had read this book before, it would have probably been said to me that I would have been guided by this book. The old politics still exists, and I was asking Mr. Lewis, what was Mr. Kwayana referring to when he said old politics? Because we had just came out of the era of, or entered into our independence, and the politics at the time, in my opinion, would have been relatively new. But in our context, 2012, 2013, we can then be very easily interpret what the old politics meant in terms of a government or persons in leadership not recognizing the will and the wish of the masses, the ordinary people, or in the case of Brother Kwayana, the working class. I would like to first start by giving an overview as what transpired in Linden 2012, not from the 1st of July or the 18th of July of the most unfortunate incident in our recent history, where 3 unarmed protesters were gunned down and several dozen injured, but from the origin of a decision that was made that had no involvement of the people, and it was void of any reasoning in relation to what the social and economic impact of any decision that would have affected those people in Linden, Region 10, in Linden in particular, and what it meant for this country as a whole. I had the privilege of assuming chairmanship of the region after a very insightful discussion with residents. The book outlines for us, and I must say, I am very, very excited that I had the opportunity to look at the book after the fact of 18th of July 2012. Because what the book is saying to us is that with or without leadership, the people are prepared to mobilize themselves and are prepared to challenge situation and condition that intends to bring hardship in relation to how they see themselves advancing both social, economic, religious, or even politically in any society under the conditions that exist within our nation at the moment. We were involved in over 150 meetings, grounding with individuals, religious organizations, community groups, individuals, sports organizations. We were grounding with individuals because our origin, and I say our not as Sharma Solomon, but the leadership that is within the region at the moment, we are all from social activist background. And the pledge that we made with those people is that we are from your generation, we are from your churches, we are from your street corners, we attend your nightclubs, we are on your ball fields, we are in your midst every day. And it is with that understanding, if you give us the chance, we will take your concerns and we will represent those concerns because we are of you. And it is with that understanding, when we go to people, when we spoke to people about this imposition and this decision that would have brought about a particular hardship that went against, as I said before, not only the constitutional rights of citizens, but the inalienable right of a human being and of man to his fellow man. It was easy for them to comply. It was easy for them to participate. It was without questioning that we had absolutely not a single dissenting voice as we went forward in those demonstrations, which started on the 5th of April. Many persons would overlook the fact that the town was shut down on the 5th of April and only remember the shutdown for the 5 days demonstration. It was a people who had had enough. When we spoke to people before and we said to them, You sat idle for 2 decades. You sat idle without objecting to things that you took for granted. You sat idle while your constitutional rights were violated. You said nothing about one TV station. You said nothing about impositions that brought about hardship. You said nothing about the sale of the bauxite industry and the destruction of your pension plan without your involvement. You said nothing with the removal of the generating system for electricity. And if you say nothing now, the only thing that you're left to lose with this imposition is your dignity. That message resonated well. We could have identified and we could have interacted with persons exactly what was outlined in this book over 43 years ago. That you have a society that felt as though leaders were not connecting with their concerns, were not bonding with the issues that were affecting them, but instead sat and interpret without coming to the ground to recognize. I took the opportunity to note a particular part of the book in the introduction, where it said, liberation where politics is an activity enhancing what the state can do. Kwayana's Bauxite Strike, and this is the introduction. Kwayana's Bauxite Strike classifies the origin of corruption. The old politics is the neglect of a national liberation party's responsibility to be agents of mass mobilization, offering education for social reconstruction and functioning as a new public morality. Instead, these post-colonial rulers concern themselves only with mobilization for electoral victory and maintaining their own authority. This proves shaky ground for aspiring rulers whom, under the pressure of self-mobilization of ordinary people, underestimate or ignore their efforts. It is in that context that when you understand what persons in Linden at that moment were thinking and at present are thinking in relation to what they perceive political parties to see them as. It was with that decision at that St. Aidan's meeting that residents spoke to their leaders after they would have self-mobilized as indicated in the book by Brother Kwayana, and the spirit of the people of Linden and Region 10 to self-mobilize outside of leadership. It was a band of 15 women who started the April demonstrations. It was then Ms. Kisoon, our Member of Parliament, after discussing with them, recognized that these housewives would have suffered the most, and they were concerned as to what will become of them, and it built momentum to the 18th of July. I remember as we proceeded along those demonstrations, we held over 50 demonstrations between April to August with not an intervention coming from the government. Again, to demonstrate where elected representatives and officials, as indicated in Brother Kwayana's book, would have seen their role relevant only to mobilize and to pay attention to persons' plight and concern when it matters at election time. People were concerned to the extent that businesses, churches, and other organizations were prepared to subscribe without consideration to what they were going to be branded as, but only to subscribe in the name of justice and the name of the fundamental rights for citizens. We have so far moved our discussion, and like Brother Kwayana would have pointed out, the very nature of the conditions of the 70s, the early 70s, was one of moving from the colonial powers and how they would have structured the bauxite company and the management and the union. And it is in the same context of expectations of coming out of the colonial struggles into an independent nation that allowed for so much expectation. It was very impressive to see in the book that Brother Kwayana made mention, and I like this point, that the most significant thing to happen after the 1763 rebellion was the fact of nationalization, where you had self-determination and will to manage one's own destiny. It is in that context that people of Linden and Region 10 saw themselves, that they were fighting for self-determination, that they were fighting against oppression, that they were fighting against an injustice that was without merit. And they took that fight in every strata of society. Every organization participated, and they were proud to know that without any involvement of hierarchy leadership, they could have mobilized themselves, women could have run soup kitchens, stores could have contributed food, men could have stood on street corners to man barricades. It was not without some amount of insights, but the most determined consciousness and spirit came from the people who stood their ground and stood resolute. I can say this, that because of the 70s and the change in dynamics on the ground, that what took place last year is one that we should take significant lessons to learn from. And as Mr. Ram said, we are doomed to repeat the past if we don't take lessons to learn so that we can advance in the future. Something thereabout. But I want the audience to understand that what is facing the people of Linden and Region 10, though it may have started as an electricity crisis, as an unfair imposition, as an imposition that to date, what the people were asking for was an opportunity to meet the leadership, like the bauxite workers in the book by Brother Kwayana were asking for an opportunity to meet the Prime Minister, then Forbes Barnum, to discuss their grievance, to say to him what the things were that were affecting them. It is in the same light for almost 3 months the people in Linden wanted to get the attention of the government and got no response, got not even a single indication that some concern or consideration were being paid for their plight. And it is in that context that it went against not only our fundamental human rights, but the Constitution of Guyana, and under the various articles which ask for the involvement of citizens in decision making that will shape their economic, social, political, and religious destiny. It is in that context that an electricity argument that would have seemed to be about one materialistic discussion went towards the struggle for rights. Because it wasn't only about electricity, it was about the rights of the citizens of Linden to be part of a decision that would have affected them, that would have caused unbearable hardship on them. It was also in defense of the rights of citizens to have access to ideas and information without interference and interruption by a government. And those rights are inscribed in the agreement that was signed on the 21st of August. Now, and it is that straw that broke the camel back that says if you would have lost everything, including your TV station, the only thing you were left to lose was your dignity. And persons were not prepared to do that. And it is in that context Brother Kwayana spoke in, where he said exactly that. The workers were not prepared to lose their dignity even in the face of nationalization. They wanted to ensure that their rights were respected, and they had the opportunity to participate in other decision-making efforts. I want to take the opportunity to thank the author of the book for giving such good recognition to situations and conditions within Linden and Region 10 that today remains very relevant and vital for our education as we move forward. And I want to thank the author and those who would have organized this event to allow Linden to be given an opportunity to express those things that continue to affect them 43 years after. Thank you very much.